My name is David Harper, and if you had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting in a courtroom fighting for my right to keep a simple wheelchair ramp on my own property, I would have laughed in disbelief. But here I was, facing the Homeowner Association's smug president, Karen Simmons, and her team of high-priced lawyers. Their demand, $200,000 in fines for what they called an unapproved structure. The ramp wasn't just a convenience, it was a necessity. After an IED blast in Afghanistan left me paralyzed from the waist down, I'd fought hard to adapt to civilian life. My small suburban home in Willow Creek was my sanctuary, until the Homeowner Association decided otherwise. It started innocently enough. A letter from the association arrived one sunny morning, tucked neatly into my mailbox. It was from Karen Simmons herself, written in her usual condescending tone. Dear Mr. Harper, we have noticed an unauthorized modification to your property. As per the guidelines outlined in Section 5.3 of the Willow Creek Covenants, no external structures may be added without prior approval from the Homeowner Association Board. Please remove the ramp immediately to avoid further penalties. Warm regards, Karen Simmons, President, Willow Creek Homeowner Association. I called the association that same day, thinking there must be some mistake. Surely they couldn't mean the wheelchair ramp. I'm sorry, Mr. Harper. Karen's voice oozed faux politeness over the phone. Rules are rules. If we let you keep it, then everyone will think they can just build whatever they want. It's about maintaining the neighborhood's aesthetic appeal. Aesthetic appeal? I snapped. This isn't a gazebo or a pool. It's a wheelchair ramp. Are you seriously telling me that's a problem? I don't make the rules, she said with a chuckle that made my blood boil. I just enforce them. The fines started piling up. $50 a day, then $100, then $500. I tried reasoning with them, even submitted a formal request for an exemption. Denied. The board claimed my ramp violated community standards. Meanwhile, Karen's property, with its gaudy pink flamingos and mismatched lawn furniture, was apparently above reproach. Things escalated when the association filed an official lawsuit against me. The court summons arrived on a rainy afternoon, delivered by a sheriff who looked almost apologetic. The Homeowner Association demanded $200,000 in damages, claiming my ramp had devalued neighboring properties. As if the lawsuit wasn't enough, strange things started happening around my property. One morning I woke up to find the ramp vandalized, its railings splintered and unusable. When I checked the security footage, I saw two men in construction uniforms smashing it with crowbars under the cover of night. They worked quickly and efficiently, as if they'd done this before. I reported the incident to the police, but the officers shrugged it off as a civil matter. Karen denied any involvement, but I could see the smirk on her face whenever she passed my house during her morning jogs. Such a shame about the ramp, she'd say with mock concern. Maybe it's a sign you should reconsider. The final straw came when the Homeowner Association orchestrated a blackout. Late one evening, as I was reading in my living room, the power suddenly cut out. My house plunged into darkness, save for the faint glow of the moon outside. My wheelchair ramp was barely visible in the pale light, and I couldn't help but feel exposed, vulnerable. The next morning I found a note taped to my front door. Compliance is not optional. The nerve of these people. I knew Karen was behind it, but proving it was another matter entirely. My neighbors, most of whom feared Karen's wrath, refused to get involved. It's not our fight, one of them whispered when I asked for support. She'll come after us next. Determined to fight back, I contacted a local lawyer, Rachel Torres, who specialized in cases against homeowner associations. She listened intently as I recounted the harassment, the vandalism, and the absurd lawsuit. They're counting on you giving up, she said. But if we can prove malicious intent or a pattern of discrimination, we might have a case. Rachel's confidence was a lifeline. Together we started gathering evidence, security footage, copies of threatening letters, and testimonies from the few brave neighbors willing to speak out. We even discovered that Karen had a history of targeting residents she deemed undesirable. A single mother had been fined into foreclosure last year for having an unauthorized garden shed. As the court date loomed, tensions in the neighborhood reached a boiling point. Karen's allies, a mix of board members and a few sycophantic neighbors, began spreading rumors about me. He's just trying to play the victim, they said. It's all about the money. But I wasn't about to back down. This wasn't just about the ramp anymore. It was about standing up to a system that preyed on the vulnerable, a system that Karen had weaponized for her own gain. The day of the hearing finally arrived. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as I rolled in, flanked by Rachel and a small group of supporters. Karen sat at the plaintiff's table, exuding smug confidence. She had an entire legal team at her disposal, while I had Rachel and the truth. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, opened the proceedings with a no-nonsense demeanor. Karen's lead attorney began with a polished argument, painting me as a disruptive resident who had willfully defied community rules. When it was Rachel's turn, she delivered a blistering rebuttal. "This isn't about a ramp," she said, her voice ringing clear in the silent courtroom. "This is about power and control. The defendant is a disabled veteran who has done nothing but try to live independently. The homeowner association's actions are not only discriminatory, but downright cruel." Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat. For the first time, her confidence seemed to waver. The courtroom battle marked only the beginning of my war against the homeowner association, though my lawyer, Rachel, had managed to expose Karen's manipulative tactics during the initial hearing. The fight was far from over. The judge had granted us additional time to gather evidence before the final ruling. But this temporary reprieve seemed to embolden Karen and her allies. 2 days after the hearing, I returned home to find my property vandalized yet again. This time, someone had spray-painted rule breaker across the wheelchair ramp. It wasn't just an act of petty vandalism, it was psychological warfare. The ramp, my lifeline, now felt like a target. Rachel's response was swift. "This is harassment, plain and simple," she said. "We'll include this in our case." But the homeowner association wasn't done. That same week, I received a new notice demanding immediate payment of $10,000 in administrative fees. It was a transparent attempt to financially cripple me before the case went to trial. Determined not to let them win, I decided to dig deeper into the homeowner association's operations. If Karen thought she could bully me into submission, she was about to learn otherwise. Late one night, I scoured the public records database, searching for anything that could link Karen and the board to illegal activities. Hours of clicking through poorly organized documents finally paid off. I stumbled upon a series of suspicious transactions between the homeowner association and a local construction company, Urban View Development. Urban View, as it turned out, had been awarded numerous contracts by the association, often at inflated prices. The kicker? Karen's brother-in-law was listed as a senior executive at Urban View. This wasn't just nepotism, it was embezzlement. I shared my findings with Rachel the next morning. Her eyes lit up as she scanned the documents. "If we can prove that these funds were misused, it'll blow their case apart," she said. "We'll need more concrete evidence, though." Meanwhile, the atmosphere in Willow Creek grew increasingly tense. My neighbors were split into two camps, those who supported me and those who sided with Karen out of fear or loyalty. One evening, as I was heading to my car, I overheard two women talking in hushed tones near my driveway. "He's just stirring up trouble in Nornon," one of them said. "If he'd just follow the rules, none of this would be happening." The other woman hesitated. "But suing him over a wheelchair ramp? That doesn't seem right." Their words stung, but they also reminded me of why I couldn't back down. This wasn't just about me anymore. If Karen's tyranny went unchecked, she'd continue to steamroll anyone who dared to stand up to her. Rachel and I decided to confront Urban View directly. Under the guise of potential clients, we scheduled a meeting with one of their junior project managers. Armed with a hidden recorder, Rachel asked pointed questions about their dealings with the homeowner association. The manager's answers were evasive at first, but Rachel's relentless probing eventually cracked his composure. "Look, all I know is that Karen has arrangements with the higher-ups," he admitted. "They've been pocketing funds for years, but I'm not getting involved in this mess." It wasn't a full confession, but it was a start. Rachel assured me it was enough to subpoena Urban View's financial records. When Karen got wind of our investigation, her retaliation was swift. That weekend, a group of homeowner association members showed up unannounced on my property, armed with clipboards and cameras. "We're conducting an inspection," Karen announced, her voice dripping with authority. "Your ramp isn't the only violation we've found." "Get off my property," I said firmly, positioning my wheelchair between them and my front door. Karen's smile didn't falter. "Refusal to cooperate will result in additional fines," she said sweetly. I filmed the entire encounter and sent the footage to Rachel, who filed a restraining order against Karen the next morning. But the damage was already done. The inspection team had snapped photos of everything from my backyard shed to my driveway, no doubt planning to use them against me. Despite Karen's attempts to intimidate me, our case was gaining momentum. Rachel's subpoena unearthed damning evidence. Bank statements showing that over $300,000 in homeowner association funds had been funneled to UrbanView for non-existent beautification projects. Rachel couldn't hide her excitement as she reviewed the documents. "This is it," she said. "This proves they've been stealing from the community. Karen won't know what hit her." For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. But I also knew better than to underestimate Karen. She'd fight tooth and nail to keep her empire intact. The evidence Rachel uncovered was damning, but exposing Karen's corruption would not be straightforward. As we prepared to present our findings, Karen and her allies escalated their tactics, turning my life into a constant battle of endurance and wits. Karen wasn't one to go down quietly. Within days of the subpoena, the Homeowner Association sent out a newsletter accusing me of being a disruptive influence. The letter claimed that my refusal to comply with community standards was causing division and financial strain on the neighborhood. "This is slander," I told Rachel, slamming the paper down on her desk. She nodded grimly. "And it's deliberate. They're trying to isolate you so you'll give up." Their plan worked on some. Neighbors who had once waved hello now avoided eye contact. Others whispered behind my back as I passed. A few brave souls expressed quiet support, but the fear of retaliation kept most of them silent. One evening, as I sat on my porch enjoying a rare moment of peace, the hum of a drone broke the quiet. I looked up to see the device hovering ominously over my property, its camera lens pointed directly at me. It lingered for several minutes before flying off toward Karen's house. Rachel's face darkened when I told her. "That's not just an invasion of privacy," she said. "It's intimidation. Document everything." The next day, I installed additional security cameras around my home. Sure enough, the drone returned. This time, I managed to capture footage of its approach and departure, including its trajectory toward Karen's backyard. Rachel added the video to our growing pile of evidence. The breaking point came during a community meeting. Karen had called the gathering under the pretense of discussing important neighborhood issues, but it quickly devolved into a public attack on my character. "Mr. Harper's actions have cost this community tens of thousands of dollars," Karen declared, standing at the front of the room like a self-appointed queen. "His refusal to follow the rules is a blatant disregard for the values we hold dear." I couldn't stay silent any longer. Rolling my wheelchair to the center of the room, I raised my voice. "What Karen isn't telling you is that she's been siphoning our dues into her brother-in-law's company," I said, holding up copies of the bank statements Rachel had uncovered. "Over $300,000 has gone to projects that don't exist. Ask yourselves where that money really went." The room erupted in chaos. Some residents shouted in disbelief, while others demanded answers from Karen. She tried to regain control, but her usually calm facade cracked under the pressure. "This is a lie," she screamed, her voice shrill. "These accusations are baseless." Rachel, who had accompanied me, stepped forward. "We have the documentation to prove it," she said coolly, "and we're prepared to present it in court." Karen stormed out of the meeting, leaving a trail of stunned silence in her wake. The next morning, I awoke to find my yard littered with trash. Someone had dumped broken glass and shredded papers all over the wheelchair ramp, making it impossible to use. Security footage revealed two masked individuals sneaking onto my property in the early hours of the morning. Rachel filed another police report, but the officers' lack of urgency was palpable. "We'll look into it," they said, but I doubted anything would come of it. Karen's influence reached further than I'd anticipated. Just when it seemed like Karen might escape unscathed, a whistleblower came forward. An anonymous email arrived in Rachel's inbox containing internal homeowner association correspondence. The messages detailed Karen's schemes to manipulate board votes, silence dissenting voices, and even conspire with UrbanView development to inflate project costs. One email stood out. "We need to make an example of Harper. If he wins, others will think they can challenge us." Rachel's eyes gleamed as she read it. "This is the smoking gun we've been waiting for." With the leaked emails added to our arsenal, our case against Karen and the homeowner association was stronger than ever. But I knew Karen wouldn't go down without a fight. Her pride and her empire were on the line, and she'd do anything to protect them. As the trial date approached, tensions in the neighborhood reached a fever pitch. Supporters and detractors clashed in heated arguments on the streets and online forums. Meanwhile, Karen retreated into her fortress-like home, refusing to face the growing backlash. The trial date finally arrived, and the air in the courtroom buzzed with tension. Karen's smug confidence had returned, bolstered by a small army of lawyers. But Rachel and I were ready. The evidence we'd collected over the past months was airtight, and the leaked emails were our trump card. The courtroom was packed with spectators, many of them my neighbors. Karen's lead attorney opened with a polished argument, painting me as a disruptive resident who refused to abide by the community's rules. Mr. Harper's actions have caused undue stress and financial burden on the Willow Creek community, the lawyer said, gesturing toward Karen, who nodded solemnly. The homeowner association's enforcement of its bylaws is not only lawful, but necessary to maintain the integrity of the neighborhood. When it was Rachel's turn, she wasted no time dismantling their claims. This case isn't about a wheelchair ramp, she began. It's about abuse of power and corruption. The homeowner association, under Karen Simmons' leadership, has violated its own bylaws and targeted Mr. Harper with baseless fines and harassment. We have the evidence to prove it. The first witness was a former board member who had resigned after clashing with Karen. He described how Karen manipulated votes and silenced dissenters, confirming the allegations in the leaked emails. She'd threaten anyone who opposed her, he said. She told me, if you're not with me, you're against me. Next, Rachel called an Urban View employee who corroborated our findings about the fraudulent contracts. We were paid for projects that never happened, he admitted. It was all arranged by Karen and her brother-in-law. Karen squirmed in her seat, her confident facade cracking with each damning testimony. When Rachel presented the leaked emails, the courtroom fell silent. The judge read through the most incriminating messages, her expression growing increasingly stern. One email stood out. If we let Harper win, it'll set a dangerous precedent. We need to crush him. Karen's lawyer attempted to argue that the emails were taken out of context, but the damage was done. The judge's disapproval was palpable. Karen took the stand, her usual arrogance replaced with feigned humility. She insisted that everything she'd done was for the good of the community. I only wanted to uphold our neighborhood standard, she said, dabbing at non-existent tears. Mr. Harper's actions undermined the harmony we've worked so hard to achieve. Rachel's cross-examination was brutal. If your goal was harmony, why did you authorize fines and legal action without consulting the board? She asked. Karen stammered. I acted within my authority as president. And is it within your authority to funnel community funds to your brother-in-law's company? Rachel pressed, holding up the financial records. Karen's silence spoke volumes. After hours of deliberation, the judge delivered her ruling. She dismissed the homeowner association's lawsuit against me, citing lack of merit and evidence of malicious intent. But she didn't stop there. The evidence presented today reveals a pattern of corruption and abuse of power within the Willow Creek Homeowner Association, the judge said. I am ordering a full audit of the association's finances and recommending that criminal charges be filed against Karen Simmons and her accomplices. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Karen's face turned ashen as the weight of the judge's words sank in. The neighborhood's response was immediate and polarizing. Supporters of Karen accused me of destroying the community, while others praised me for standing up to her tyranny. Several neighbors who had remained silent throughout the ordeal came forward with their own stories of harassment and unfair treatment by the association. Karen resigned from her position the following day, but the fallout continued. News of the trial spread, attracting media attention. Reporters camped outside my house, eager for interviews. I gave only one statement. This was never about me. It was about justice and accountability. No one should have to endure what I did just to live in peace. With Karen gone and the homeowner association under scrutiny, life in Willow Creek began to change. The board was restructured and new policies were implemented to ensure transparency and fairness. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of hope. The wheelchair ramp remained intact, a symbol of resilience and victory. As I watched the sunset from my porch one evening, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The battle had been exhausting, but it was worth it. While the trial was over, the fight against systemic corruption was far from finished. My story had inspired others to stand up to abusive homeowner associations across the country. I received letters and emails from people sharing their own struggles, thanking me for giving them the courage to fight back. Karen's downfall was just the beginning. If there was one thing this experience had taught me, it was that even the smallest act of defiance could spark a revolution. In the aftermath of the trial, the air in Willow Creek was thick with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Karen's resignation had sent shockwaves through the community, and the impending audit of the homeowner association promised even more revelations. But while Karen had been dethroned, her influence still lingered in the shadows. The newly elected board wasted no time implementing reforms. They organized town hall meetings to address residents' concerns and to ensure transparency moving forward. Attendance was higher than anyone had expected, with neighbors eager to voice their frustrations and share their grievances. For years, we've been afraid to speak up, one elderly neighbor admitted during the first meeting. Karen ruled with an iron fist. It's time for a change. As the meetings continued, more stories of Karen's abuses surfaced. She had bullied single mothers, intimidated retirees, and fined residents into submission for minor infractions. The audit revealed that over $500,000 had been siphoned from community funds into fraudulent projects. Urban View Development, now under investigation, cut ties with Karen's brother-in-law, who faced criminal charges alongside her. Despite these victories, I couldn't shake the feeling that the fight wasn't over. My neighbors were still divided, with some blaming me for the upheaval. One afternoon, as I wheeled down the street to check my mail, I encountered a group of residents murmuring amongst themselves. When they saw me, their conversation stopped abruptly. "Do you really think all this was worth it?" one of them asked, crossing her arms. "We've lost so much trust in this community." "We lost trust because of Karen, not because of the truth coming out," I replied firmly. "If we don't hold people accountable, nothing will ever change." Her expression softened, but I could tell the wounds of the conflict would take time to heal. Amid the lingering tension, an unlikely ally emerged. Tom Peterson, one of Karen's staunchest supporters during the trial, approached me at my front porch one evening. "David," he began awkwardly, shuffling his feet, "I owe you an apology. I didn't want to believe what Karen was doing, but you were right to stand up to her." I studied him for a moment, unsure if his change of heart was genuine. "It wasn't just about me," I said finally. "This community deserved better." Tom nodded. "If there's anything I can do to help rebuild, just let me know." His words marked a turning point. Slowly but surely, more residents began to come together, united by a shared desire to move forward. News outlets continued to cover the story, framing it as a cautionary tale about unchecked power in homeowner associations. I received invitations to speak at town halls and advocacy events, sharing my experience to inspire others facing similar struggles. One particular event stood out: a gathering of homeowners from across the state who had formed a coalition to combat abusive associations. Standing before the crowd, I felt a surge of determination. "Change doesn't come easy," I told them, "but every small act of defiance adds up. Together, we can make sure no one else has to go through what we did." The applause that followed was deafening. Meanwhile, Karen's downfall was far from over. The criminal charges against her included embezzlement, fraud, and harassment. During her trial, former allies turned on her, revealing the full extent of her schemes. She pleaded guilty to several charges, resulting in a hefty fine and a prison sentence. The day she was taken into custody, a sense of closure washed over me. Karen's reign of terror was finally over. With the homeowner association's finances restored and new leadership in place, Willow Creek began to heal. The reforms implemented by the board ensured that residents' voices were heard, and community events fostered a renewed sense of unity. One evening, as I sat on my porch, a group of children ran by, laughing and playing. Their joy was infectious, and for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. Rachel joined me shortly after, a smile on her face. "Looks like the neighborhood's finally turning a corner," she said. I nodded. It's been a long road, but it was worth it. Though my battle with the homeowner association was over, the impact of our victory continued to ripple outward. Advocacy groups used our story to push for legislative changes, and new laws were proposed to protect homeowners from similar abuses. For me, life returned to a semblance of normalcy. The wheelchair ramp that had sparked the entire conflict remained intact, a symbol of resilience and justice. And though the scars of the fight lingered, they served as a reminder that even one person's determination could make a difference. As the sun set over Willow Creek, I knew one thing for certain. I had fought for what was right, and I'd do it all over again if I had to.